So, have you ever had that moment in marriage where your wife says something that sounds amazing, but really it's a trap? Yeah, mine said, do whatever you want. At first, I thought, finally, freedom. Then I noticed the way she was looking at me. And that's when I realized freedom is terrifying. Because when your wife says, do whatever you want, it's not about choice. It's about survival. Every decision you make suddenly feels like a high-stakes mission. Should I pick the blue towels? Should I clean the garage? Should I breathe? Every move is being silently judged. Marriage is like a motivational boot camp disguised as love. You learn patience, emotional intelligence, and how to survive awkward situations without losing your sense of humor. You realize the little things like saying, yes, honey, can actually change the course of the week. And if you can laugh at yourself along the way, you discover that life isn't about winning arguments. It's about surviving them gracefully, learning a little humility, and finding joy in the chaos. By the end of this speech, you'll understand that sometimes the most powerful lessons in life come disguised as one simple, terrifying sentence. Do whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Those words sound harmless until you realize they're actually a high-stakes test disguised as freedom. You hear them and think, finally, I can do anything. You picture yourself making bold decisions, taking control, maybe even winning a small victory in the domestic battlefield. Then you notice the way she's looking at you, calm, quiet, but sharp, and suddenly confidence leaves the room faster than you can say, I've got this. Every choice you make becomes a gamble. Should I pick the blue towels or the gray ones? Should I fix the leaky faucet now or later? Should I even touch the thermostat? Each decision carries the invisible weight of silent judgment, and every move feels like walking on a tightrope over a pit of lava. You start second-guessing yourself, recalling tiny mistakes from last week, last month, even last year, all of which you thought were long forgotten. And the kicker, the more you try to rationalize your choices, the more you realize logic has left the building. This is the ultimate test of patience, humility, and self-control, and if you survive it with a sense of humor intact, you've just earned a PhD in marriage navigation. Confidence is a tricky thing. One minute you feel like a master of your own life, walking around like everything is under control, and the next minute it evaporates the second your wife raises an eyebrow. Just one eyebrow, perfectly arched, silently scanning you. And suddenly every decision you've ever made comes into question. Did I lock the door? Did I take out the trash? Did I somehow forget to mention the thing I said 3 weeks ago? That single look communicates more than words ever could. It's like a silent spotlight shining on your mistakes, your oversights, and every little misstep you've tried to ignore. You begin to realize that confidence isn't something you can fake when someone has perfected the art of subtle judgment. And the funny part is, the look doesn't even need to last long. Just a flash, and it's enough to make you question every choice you've made that day. You start talking to yourself in whispers, pacing slightly, thinking, maybe if I just nod, everything will be fine. It's the ultimate test of self-awareness, patience, and oddly enough, humor. Because the only way to survive that look is to laugh at how completely powerless you suddenly feel. Silent judgment is one of the most powerful, underestimated forces in marriage. You walk into a room thinking everything is fine, only to feel it, the unspoken critique hovering over every action you take. It doesn't come with a loud voice or a dramatic decoration. It's subtle, quiet, almost invisible, but it speaks volumes. One crossed arm, a slight tilt of the head, a tiny sigh, and suddenly you're analyzing every word you've ever said, every small mistake you've made, and every future decision you're about to make. The trick is learning how to read it without panicking, to recognize the cues before they escalate into frustration or tension. You start noticing patterns, the soft glance, the subtle pause, the almost imperceptible frown. You begin to understand that marriage isn't just about conversation, it's about observation, empathy, and timing. You develop a mental radar, a skill that allows you to navigate tricky moments with grace and humor. And the best part, once you master the art of reading silent judgment, you start turning potential conflict into connection realizing that understanding the unspoken is more valuable than winning any argument. Being right feels amazing at first. You make your point, you present your evidence, and for a few glorious minutes, you feel like the smartest person in the room. You might even lean back, chest out, thinking, finally, someone sees it my way. But then comes bedtime, and suddenly all that confidence you built evaporates. Because when the lights go down, the arguments don't disappear. They just sit there quietly, waiting for you to reflect on them. You realize that logic and facts mean very little when emotions are involved. That triumphant moment of being right feels hollow when your spouse is silently remembering everything you could have done differently, everything you've said, and every tiny flaw that suddenly seems enormous in the darkness. You start wondering if winning an argument is really worth the tension, the awkward silences, or the mental energy spent replaying your victory. And the kicker, the more you try to rationalize your correctness, the more you realize that marriage isn't about proving a point, it's about surviving, growing, and finding peace. Being right might feel good in daylight, but at night, it's humility, patience, and humor that actually carry you through. Some arguments in marriage aren't meant to be won. They're meant to teach you patience. You walk in thinking, maybe I can make my point, but the moment she opens her mouth, you know you've already lost. And losing doesn't feel great, at least not in the beginning. But if you pay attention, it's actually a masterclass in self-control. You start learning how to pause before reacting, how to listen without interrupting, and how to choose your words carefully. You realize that yelling or over-explaining won't change anything. It only escalates the tension. Patience becomes your secret weapon. You begin practicing it everywhere, nodding, smiling, and sometimes even pretending you understand when you really don't. Over time, you notice something funny. Losing gracefully actually earns you more peace than winning ever did. You also start understanding that patience isn't passive. It's an active skill that allows you to navigate emotions, avoid unnecessary conflict, and create harmony. And the most surprising lesson, the more arguments you lose, the more resilient, self-aware, and emotionally intelligent you become. Learning to survive marriage's small battles with humor, humility, and quiet confidence. Humor is like a hidden superpower in marriage that most people underestimate. You can forget an anniversary, leave the lights on, or misplace the grocery list, and suddenly everything could spiral into tension. But a well-timed joke changes the entire mood. It's not about being a stand-up comedian. It's about using laughter as a bridge to diffuse stress and create connection. For example, when I accidentally ruined dinner, instead of panicking, I made a small joke about our gourmet disaster. And just like that, the tension melted. Humor turns mistakes into stories, arguments into lessons, and awkward silences into shared laughter. You begin to realize that humor isn't just funny. It's practical. It protects relationships from unnecessary conflict, builds patience, and reminds both people that perfection isn't the goal. The key is timings. Say the right thing at the right moment, and suddenly a potential battle becomes a memory you'll laugh about later. Over time, you learn to see humor in the everyday chaos, the minor failures, and the unpredictable moments, and you discover that marriage isn't about being flawless. It's about surviving together with laughter, grace, and a little clever wit. Marriage is probably the most intense emotional intelligence training you'll ever get without even realizing it. One moment you're confident, thinking you have everything under control, and the next you're trying to decode moods, tone, and subtle gestures that could mean almost anything. You start noticing tiny signals, the way she pauses before speaking, the tilt of her head, the quiet sigh that says, pay attention, and suddenly you understand that words are only part of communication. Emotional intelligence in marriage isn't about knowing all the answers. It's about sensing emotions, responding thoughtfully, and managing your own reactions. You begin to realize that listening can be more powerful than speaking, that empathy can prevent arguments, and that timing is everything when delivering even the smallest comment. You practice patience and self-control, learning to choose your words wisely and understand your spouse's perspective, sometimes before they even say it out loud. Marriage forces you to read situations like a book, anticipate moods, and navigate delicate moments with subtlety, humor, and grace. Over time, you discover that mastering emotional intelligence isn't theoretical. It's earned in every conversation, every silent glance, and every shared laugh. There's a phrase in marriage more powerful than any motivational quote, life hack, or negotiation tactic, and it's just 3 words. Yes, honey. You say it at the right moment, and suddenly tension evaporates, conflicts shrink, and your week feels manageable again. It doesn't even matter if you actually agree with what was said. The magic lies in acknowledging your partner, validating their perspective, and keeping the peace. Timing is everything. You can't wait until the argument escalates. It has to be said before the silent judgment builds. Sometimes you add a smile, a nod, or a little humor, and suddenly you've turned a potential disaster into a peaceful moment. It's a simple practice that trains patience, emotional awareness, and humility, teaching you that not every point needs to be argued, not every idea needs to be challenged, and not every detail requires correction. Over time, yes, honey becomes more than words. It's a survival skill, a secret weapon, and a reminder that marriage is about partnership, compromise, and shared peace. And the funny part is, the phrase doesn't just save the week, it quietly strengthens relationships, builds trust, and often turns small challenges into laughter. Filled memories, mistakes in marriage are inevitable. You'll spill coffee, leave the lights on, forget a grocery item, or accidentally insult a favorite shirt, and in any other scenario, these would be minor annoyances, but in marriage, they have the potential to escalate quickly. The key is learning how to turn those moments into laughter instead of tension. Humor works like a reset button, diffusing stress, creating connection, and reminding both people that perfection isn't the goal. For example, when I once dropped an entire plate of spaghetti, I didn't panic. I made a small joke about our abstract art dinner, and suddenly the disaster became a story we still laugh about. Over time, you start seeing mistakes as opportunities to lighten the mood, strengthen bonds, and practice patience and humility. Humor doesn't just mask mistakes, it reframes them, transforming frustration into shared amusement and turning awkward moments into stories worth retelling. You learn to approach mishaps creatively, to inject levity when things go wrong, and to protect relationships from unnecessary conflict. And the surprising lesson is that the more you embrace humor and mistakes, the easier it becomes to navigate everyday challenges while keeping love, respect, and laughter alive. Marriage teaches you that sometimes the strongest move isn't being right, it's letting it go. Pride feels good in the moment. You win the argument, prove your point, and for a fleeting second, you feel like a genius. Then you realize that the victory doesn't matter nearly as much as the peace that comes from surrendering the ego. Choosing peace over pride is subtle, almost invisible, but its power is immense. You start noticing small moments where saying, "You're right," or "It's fine," prevents tension from escalating, preserves harmony, and saves mental energy for more important battles. Over time, you see that this isn't weakness, it's strategy. It's a quiet, deliberate choice to prioritize the relationship over being technically correct. You learn to pause, listen, and respond with thoughtfulness instead of defensiveness. You notice how much calmer the home feels when conflicts are avoided or softened, and how much happier everyone is when laughter replaces criticism. Choosing peace over pride slowly becomes a habit, a skill, and a secret strength, teaching patience, empathy, and emotional intelligence. And eventually, you realize that humility doesn't diminish your value. It enhances it, and it makes everyday life in marriage smoother, lighter, and far more enjoyable. So, the moral of the story is, when your wife says, "Do whatever you want," it's not permission, it's a test of patience, humor, and emotional intelligence. Marriage isn't about winning arguments, being right, or even making perfect decisions. It's about surviving the tricky moments, laughing at your mistakes, and learning to navigate life together with a little humility and a lot of humor. The smartest move isn't the clever comeback or the perfectly argued point. It's knowing when to nod, say, "Yes, honey," and maybe, just maybe, make a joke before it all blows up. Because in the end, marriage is less about control and more about connection. And if you can survive the week without a major disaster while keeping your sense of humor intact, well, you've basically already won